Well, and in California, the other thing about this, when you talk about South Africa, the governor has this committee that's pulled together. It's like the Ag Equity Committee, and their plan is basically to use grant funds from the state of California to buy back land from farmers. And you're probably wondering who would sell their farm, but if you take down a dam and take away all of their water, their land kind of becomes worthless, so it becomes super cheap for the government to buy back. But they can't continue to manage that property anymore because, and a lot of these people, like the Potter Valley Scott Dam, it's been there for 100 years. So a lot of them had no idea that this was even a possibility. But then they want to buy back this land and basically grant it back out to, to diversify to, minorities. But a lot of that's also going to remain in state hands and go into renewable energy projects. And if you look at California right now, they've got one nuclear site that I think is costing the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars to keep operating at this point in time. But their solar projects haven't done very well either. They spent $2.2 billion on a solar farm out in the desert that is shutting down next year. So it's sad, but they're actually, a lot of these projects that seem to be shutting down farmers and ranchers are coupled with this plan to basically buy back a bunch of land and redistribute it.
It's crazy because I've seen these parallels now. It happened in Zimbabwe first. It used to be known as the breadbasket of Africa. The Marxist government put in place, by the way, with a lot of help from Jimmy Carter and Henry Kissinger and the rest of the clown car. Henry Kissinger, infamous for National Security Memo 200. We're going to use food as a weapon to depopulate the third world. They came in and they seized massive amounts of the most productive farms in the world and redistributed to their cronies who had no idea how to farm, who had no interest in farming, and they needed food aid. Surprise! Now we have to send them food aid to prevent them from starving. We're watching the same thing happen in South Africa. Massive agitation about, the farmers have the wrong skin color or whatever. The government owns way more land than these supposedly evil, terrible farmers, and yet somehow we still have to expropriate their land. Now they're doing it without compensation. They're not even pretending like there's any legitimacy here. And, of course, we're going to see that in the United States if we're not careful. It's the direction we're moving. Charlie, I want to turn now to the international kind of big picture. Sure. The World Economic Forum has been obsessed with our food systems for some time. They've developed these food innovation hubs in the Netherlands and other places where, again, they're kicking off huge numbers of farmers, expropriating land, bankrupting families who've been farming this land for centuries. We're seeing the Rockefellers with their agriculture, food system transformation programs. What are these people up to, and what does that mean, not just for the people who produce our food, which we're very grateful for them, but for those of us who also like to eat?
Well, I think it comes down to a lot of different things, actually, because if you look at the tech boom right now, the biggest problem that they're going to run into is private land ownership. You're seeing it. I'm going to revert back to the U.S. here for a second, but this is going on across the world. You hear about these same stories happening in Europe where they're putting in these high voltage transmission line corridors in order to feed data centers and this big tech revolution that we're going through. In Maryland, you've got a case right now where farmers are going to the Supreme Court because they've got people coming out and surveying their properties before they even had eminent domain. It's almost like these things are planned, but the farmers are in the way of all that, and the resources are too thin for all of that because this growth requires a lot of water. Farmers require water, so it's just kind of eliminating them to get them out of the way. But then on the other side of that, you have these patented food products coming out, and the more, when you look at the Netherlands, they're becoming a hub for some of these lab-grown foods, alternative foods that most of us would not want to eat, but they're developing them there. And it's completely replacing agriculture. But with that, you can pretty much do anything you want to the population because now you control what's going into their bodies. Now you control their income even more because you're talking about trillions of dollars that are spent every year just on agriculture. Imagine that going into patented food products, and imagine, trying to get vaccines out to the general public that don't want them. It's in their food. You can do pretty much anything you want to. It's the
And they've
ultimate
talked about this
control.
openly, Charlie. That's not like speculation. They've talked about vaccinating us through our lettuce, and I mean they're not playing with this stuff. Yeah, that's really troubling. And of course the desire for intellectual property is really significant there. They want to own the genetic code of the plants that we eat and the animals that we eat, and they've made that very clear.
At this point, they've actually changed, the microbials of the soil. If you get into some of the projects Gates is working on, if people talk about GMOs, but it's so widespread in our ecosystem at this point in time, and it's all patented, so we don't own it anymore.
So what does this mean for